Or about this, like. 500,000 or 50. Thank you all for being here.
With that, I think on the agendas, first we need to call to order and appoint the chair. So I think our vice chair probably is our de facto leader at this time. If he wants to call to order, maybe introductions, and then we will go through the process of nominating and appointing a chair. Is that right, Chris? I don't have the agenda.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so call to order.
Okay, this meeting is called to order, meeting number 2, 2026 budget. I need to say anything else?
You're Gary.
My name is Gary. Not April.
Tina McNerney.
Ramberg.
Amanda.
Sorry. Amanda Gatekeep, City Council.
Grant Polson, City Council.
Doug Stepina, City Council.
Abigail Elder, City Manager.
Chris Antonetti, Finance Director.
Paul Blackburn, Budget Committee Member.
Rudy Kellner, Budget Committee Member.
Lally Rivera, City Council.
Ben Mitchell, City Council.
Budget Committee.
In back, starting with Neil.
Hey, also City Police.
Josh Rogers, Chief Fire.
Adam Schmidt, Public Works Director.
Leela, management analyst. Wait, what'd you get in the back?
University Bar. Guys.
No, yeah, one on.
And we have someone, oh, great,
Hi, I'm Brandon Kammer on the budget committee.
Hey, Brandon.
thank you. Okay, next order of business.
Is elect officers.
Megan.
So I think we're looking for nominations.
Oh yeah, we need nominations to elect a chairman and vice chair of the board. Does anybody have any nominations?
I nominate Vice Chair, Acting Chair Reed.
I'll accept that. Sure. We have any other nominations from chair?
Is there a second for that?
That's an important job.
So Graham was the second for that.
Councilman Stewart.
Say all in favor.
What's that?
All in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's good.
Congratulations.
No abstentions.
Thank you, guys.
Now you wanna call for
Does this
vice?
come with any list of duties that I have?
Oh, yeah, we'll give you the whole manual later.
Oh, Kathy, please check that.
Now we wanna
Do
call
we
for
have
vice.
any nominations for the position of vice chair now that it's vacated?
I nominate Megan.
We will also.
I'll second.
Oh.
Gotta get that one.
Oh, wait, you can tell me.
I think just that was just.
Tina.
Are there any other nomination or? Or did you accept
I
it?
will accept that.
Okay, good. Okay, nominations are closed. We have a, no, we need a second.
We got a second. We just gotta vote.
Second, yeah.
Get a fight over
The
something.
vote.
Okay, nominations are closed. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So next on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes.
So I will note that if you were not here last year, you can still approve the minutes, because it is a approval for function and form, it's not necessarily about having have been present.
That's what I'm supposed to do. Okay. So we call, we like to, okay, do we have somebody to approve the meeting minutes of May 14th?
So moved.
And May 21st, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All meeting minutes are approved. Now we're gonna have a presentation of the budget message.
Great. You know, as chair, you could choose to skip over that part.
All right.
Why we're here, Abigail.
We want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you all for being here tonight. It feels a little like a reunion, because it's so long since I've seen you all, so thank you for that. I have a short presentation, it's always really high level, and then, you know, experts are behind me and around me to provide more feedback. And information, interrupt at any time if you have questions, but I'll just go through things kind of quickly. 1 second to share. There we go, great. Let's see. 1 more second here. There we go. You've all introduced yourselves, so Oregon is unique in that it has a really participatory process for its budget. And so we have the equal number of city council members and community members, and I want to thank you all for making your time. This is the most beautiful time of year, and you've chosen to sit inside a closed room, and I very much appreciate that of you. So just quick timeline. Today is our first official budget meeting. If you were here last week, that was our informal, although we did notice it, and you can watch the YouTube video if you've not seen it. And then we have a couple meetings coming up, so you definitely don't want to miss, the 13th when we talk about urban renewal. That one will include the urban renewal budget committee as well. That one is a twofer. And then of course, Public Works always has the best show, so I'm sure they have something amazing to put up for you. And of course, next week we have all of our other general funds, so that is also amazing. Everybody's. As always, that we take direction from lots of different places, the city has a comprehensive plan. But here are some of the pieces that really direct our work, and that first one is the work plan that the city council established. It's a 2-year work plan, so we're halfway through that, more than halfway through that. The affordable housing strategy, the transportation system plan, the multi-jurisdictional parks master plan, which is many, I think it's 5 different organizations on that. Safe Routes to School, and then the Hood River County Energy Plan. As I mentioned, we have the Hood River City Council work plan. These are the goals that council has set back in December of 2024 for the 25-26 calendar years. No surprise to anyone, housing for all, an informed and inclusive community, vibrant transportation system, well-maintained and safe community, environmentally sustainable and resilient community, parks and open space, and the healthy organization. I very much appreciated the group putting a focus on keeping the organization and the employees and the processes sustainable, healthy, ongoing. And I'll talk about some of that today. So on Monday, I just did a rundown of all of the council work plan projects and their current status. So if you wish to learn a deeper dive into where those are and what's happening with them, watch Monday because it's available online. Today, I wanted to take a deeper dive into the day-to-day work that is done by city staff, by our partners and our contractors, and the things that we do. We often kind of use an iceberg analogy for this, right? These are the parts that you see of the city, and then down below are the things that are happening all the time, and that part is much, much bigger than the part that might be visible. So looking at these in kind of 3 main areas, and my apologies to the department heads who are probably going to use these numbers, and I stole their thunder. You might see these numbers again later, but it doesn't seem like a very big city to have 75 lane miles of city streets. ODOT, I think my favorite one on this one is 1,300 catch basins. So, when when there's leaves and when there's snow, please, be a good neighbor and do those catch basins. So just a reflection of all of these things need maintenance. All of these things need to be touched. So the pressure reducing valves have to be exercised once a year.
Yes.
So we have to touch all 43 of those every year. That's a major lift. All of these things do not just exist on themselves and then, we put them in and they're good forever. They have to be maintained, and it takes a lot of staff to do that. In public safety, similarly, 400 fire hydrants, which also have to be exercised, I think, once a year. In fact, that's tied to insurance ratings, for like businesses, and we're going through this, the ISO study, which determines, it's an index that insurance companies use when they're working with businesses. That fact that we can demonstrate that we are regularly maintaining our fire hydrants has a direct effect on that. And our response times, and the number of staff we have, and the training they've had, pieces that have a direct relationship to businesses and their pocketbooks, but you would never ever see that. If I asked you, what do you think you went into, how your insurance gets figured out, think about how many fire hydrants there are, and the last time somebody touched them. Emergency calls, the number of times police have had some kind of contact with people is well more than 10,000. And then my favorite statistic of the day is we hold court every Tuesday morning. It feels very routine. It happens pretty quickly. But our judge has issued more than 700 new rulings a year that has a direct impact on people. And even if the decision or ruling is only a couple minutes in court. The work to get it to that point takes a lot of time and a lot of staff effort. And then I wanna recognize not just the building permits and we contract inspections through the county, but we help with scheduling. But the work that's done by our elected officials and our appointed officials. And we have planning commissions, meetings, we ask them to be available 24 weeks of the year, or 24 Mondays of the year. We generally cancel about half of them. We had 22 city council meetings, we passed 29 resolutions, many of which were land use, annexation, subdivisions, other pieces, and 8 ordinances, all of which had, legal work, they had hearings, there are a lot of pieces that go into that. And then finally, it's, I want some credit for the people behind the scenes who support the people that have the more visible work. Administration, can't say enough about the importance of human resources, IT, which I think Chris will probably talk about more. We've done an IT study, we have a lot of work to do to improve we have good technology, we need to continue to invest in that, particularly around cybersecurity. And then you'll see that our legal costs have gone up over the last several years, in part because we have a federal lawsuit right now. We use labor attorneys to negotiate our public collective bargaining agreements, all of these pieces that are somewhat invisible to you. So those are the day-to-day things, the routine things. Some other things that come up beyond the day-to-day, as I mentioned, Panabaker is our federal case, which will be heard July 7th in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. They'll be in Portland, so that is years in the making, but mostly invisible to folks. Things like the downtown ADA ramps, ODOT did those, we didn't do those, but we still had to manage and communicate and work with people. I think jurisdictional transfer, another piece that is years in the making before they'll be any kind of visible work on it. My thanks to the staff and the department heads who work incredibly hard to move all of these pieces forward bit by bit as they find the time and make the time on top of their day-to-day work. So looking ahead at this coming year, some of the assumptions that we have and that Chris and I communicated to department heads as they made their budgets, kind of the underlying framework here, are we're still continuing to be concerned about the rising costs, the instability at the federal level and how that can affect the prices we pay and the revenue that we might indirectly receive. The state, we definitely don't know what's happening with transportation funding. I don't know if that will have an effect on us, but certainly as the state has its pressures, those things may trickle down to us. 2 noted ODOT projects that have unknown costs right now. The elevated sidewalk, that's the project at 13th and May. That project has been so painful. We've been waiting, the city has asked to exit that project. We are waiting for ODOT to tell us how much it's gonna cost us to ODOT to exit. We're very anxious about that. And then Randon Cascade, I hope you have been enjoying that traffic light for quite some time. However, ODOT has not finished the land acquisition costs of that. There is one more land acquisition dispute that is in court. And those costs, ODOT runs that process, but those costs are ours to pay. We're paying for Department of Justice attorneys time, we're paying for ODOT time. And we thought we were gonna get a refund, but now it looks that we will actually be paying into the 6 figures to finish up the land acquisition costs for that project. So once again, an example of felt so good to get that project done, cross it off the list, but gosh, there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. So not knowing exactly where we are with that and what that means for our road fund, which is already in pretty bad shape. Another assumption is just calling out that the city made a policy decision many years ago, and I'm not asking to question that, but our system development charges go to the Parks District, so we don't have any dedicated funds for parks. Anything we do with parks is comes from our general fund. And then no new city staff, so I've just listed all of the things that we do day to day. I've talked about some of the projects that we have. And Public Works has more than 20 capital improvement projects planned for this coming year. We could definitely use new staff. If I could, my first priority would be a second detective. As we have seen The workload of the detective has so increased and things get more complicated. It is too much workload for one detective. I would like to add another management staff member at fire department. Currently, our new fire chief has everyone there reports to him. There is no kind of middle level in management. There are union members who have some supervisory duties, but they are union members, not management members. And so, and same with, I would also say, planning at some point needs an additional staff member if we want to continue to do the number of initiatives and long-range planning that we seek to do. So none of that is in this budget. I don't see it coming in the next couple of years, because of the financial constraints of the city. And that is, we are, as a city, very lucky to be in the situation where we are, where we're not adding, but we're also not cutting. Like, we are in pretty good shape compared to lots of other jurisdictions. But wanted to let you know that there are lots of needs that the city has that I have said no to. And in fact, department heads have known for a long time that that was gonna be the situation, but we have needs, they're not yet, they're not here. And then also no new big initiatives. We have lots of ideas of things we'd like to take on, or pieces that we as staff or you as council would like to do. Those aren't in this this piece as well. This has not really directly affected the city, but I think it's such an interesting data point that the county shared with me a while back. This is a map of the county, and the blue are properties that are paying the standard tax rate. So you can see the city is much of blue in the upper right hand corner. The yellow is specially assessed, that has a different tax base, so it's not paying the full standard rate. And then the red is tax exempt. Probably most of it's forest land. Some of it, I'm not sure the relationship to dedicated farmland, if that is also exempt or in the special, but to recognize that in this county, it's a big county with a lot of land, a lot of roads, a lot of infrastructure, but it is not taxed at all at the same rate. So kind of looking ahead, how do we balance a budget that has lots of demands and lots of ambitions? I love how ambitious we are in the city. We definitely try to punch above our weight. We do that by remaining transparent and accountable. We have strong audit processes. A number of things that Chris will review over the next couple of weeks will be changes that you see because the audit rules have changed and things get recategorized in different places. That is a constant. Audits are constantly evolving and we're evolving along with that. Prioritizing funding for city essential services. Like I say, we're not adding new staff, we're not adding new initiatives because we're going to prioritize the basics and keep doing the good work that we're doing. We're also going to work on ensuring long-term fiscal health. We always look at, one-time versus ongoing costs. We're not going to add staff with some grant funding that we get for a year. We definitely need to see that we have a sustainable path forward. And then seek outside funding when appropriate. We definitely, I think Haley spends 10% of her time watching webinars, getting ready for possible grants that we may or may not be eligible for. A lot of times, and if you've been here before, you've heard me say federal grants, the city of Hood River has generally not been competitive in the past. And either they are categories for which, like, we don't run an airport, so we don't get airport grants. I don't want an airport, I'm not saying that. Or our area median income is too high, or we have some other criteria that does not really avail us to the federal grants that are available. But we continue to look and we're always checking in with our federal and state representatives of are there other opportunities, can we find pieces for that? And then we will continue to study and adjust rates and fees. Mayor and I run Mark Bailey's radio show on Monday, and he made the comment that water rates were $14.99 forever, and how painful that was when the city had to make an adjustment in order to invest in infrastructure. And kind of, I don't want to overstate this, but I'm gonna say he kind of congratulated the city for like its fiscal responsibility of reviewing rates and raising them on a small incremental business basis, so that we don't have to like make major surprising changes. The slow and steady has created a sustainable source for us to invest in our infrastructure and our other work. So coming up this coming year, we've done a kind of placeholder rate study for some selected utilities this year, and then in the next year we will be doing a rate study for utilities, for water, for sewer rates. It's just scheduled to come up again. We do that every 5 or 6 years, so it's nice. very much appreciate that this city has that stuff kind of dialed in on clockwork. So we don't have to make big decisions, we've already kind of set that path. And then I think this is the year that we will look at and explore options for new revenue. Certainly, council is on track to propose a bond measure for November 2026. Those would be for new projects, that would be housing and the remodel for police, because that area, if you have not seen the police area down below, and I can't quite call it a station. You see the police basement, we definitely, if we have a break, definitely take you through there, want you to be able to see that. And there might be other options. We are lucky as a city, I think Chris said this last week, that there are tools in our financial toolbox that we have not had to use that other cities have used. So this year, really taking a more deliberate look at some of those options and thinking about how we can right-size the city going forward for the coming years, both in the services that we provide and in the revenue that we collect. Other ways that we are responsible, again, prioritizing funding for city essential services. Is it legally required? Does it have a public safety impact? What is this service delivery? Can we invest in reliability? I really want to have proactive work on our water systems so that I don't have to, shut off water or do major emergency cleanups afterwards. And then the indirect work that supports all that. And then skilled staff. I believe, shouldn't say this, are we fully staffed? No, you have some vacancies. We are so close. When I first started with the city, I started in November 21. That summer of 2022, we were so thinly staffed, every department, that we closed our offices on Fridays because we did not have enough staff to actually pull things together. I am so pleased that we are in a place now where we are running smoothly. We definitely, need those vacancies filled, but we were at a point several years ago where folks were working sick because they just could not afford to be off because there was no one else to cover for them. We are in a healthier place than we were before, and I want to keep us that way. And so part of that is, of course, hiring, retention, onboarding, helping people feel like this is the place they want to be. We have some longevity investments in some of our contracts. I think with one of our collective bargaining, we're talking about that for the first time. We also talk about that for our non-represented staff. Evaluating our outsourced versus our in-house work. As a small organization, we outsource a lot. So we'll be looking to see, does it make more sense to bring this in-house from a service delivery, customer service point of view, and what does the cost look like? And then, as I said, no new staff positions this year. So I think I'm very close to my last slide. Some assumptions, we assume that costs are going to increase. We're expecting a big jump in IT and cybersecurity costs. And then that personnel costs will go up more than inflation, and part of that is we have some collective bargaining agreements that are not yet finalized, but looking like they will have some increased personnel costs. Insurance and our PERS rates are going up double digits. And then in the wage table, we have I've made the decision to move some selective positions because they were getting behind, or that job now has more responsibility, or I'm concerned about compression, that the people reporting to that person are starting to creep up to the point where they're perhaps making more than the person who's supervising them. So looking at that, and looking in this coming year to also study some of those select positions and some additional ones, just to make sure, are we competitive? Are we appropriate? Are we abiding by Oregon pay equity law? It's just so important just to stay on top of those things. So that is also in this year's plan. And then looking ahead, like I say, we're going to keep doing the things that we're doing. The union contract for bargaining for police, I believe, is up this coming year. So we'll have that. We'll continue to make progress on the council work plan. We'll continue to keep tearing up the streets and making your life inconvenient, but also investing in good infrastructure. And we'll keep moving toward a November 2026 bond. That feels like the kind of the biggest piece for this group to know. This budget does not have assumptions about whether that bond were to pass or not, because even if it were to pass, that would not actually take effect until the following year. Those are my opening remarks. Any thoughts, questions, ideas? Otherwise, I think turn it back to the chair.
No questions? All right,
Thank you.
Yes, we'll move on to the budget overview portion. Thank you, Abigail.
Um, well, thank you everyone for spending time on this. Again, as I mentioned last week, really appreciate everyone's participation. Obviously, this is a very, very important time of year for us. It's a big list for us to do this. I always appreciate feedback. I always appreciate questions. And so I circulated the first round of questions that were received. If you have not had a chance to review it, there were some good questions in there, so I would recommend sort of going through that if possible. I've received some additional questions this morning. I'll get those circulated. I'll do the best as possible to answer some of those as we go through here. There's a lot to cover, but I'll also try to go through here pretty quickly. So as part of the budget overview, the City of Hood River is obviously a fund structure. It's comprised of 9 primary funds. Each of them have a number of sub-funds. Primary among them are the general fund and the restricted fund. General fund is essential services and programs, fire, police, parks, planning, etc. The revenue from those for those funds for the general fund, property taxes, TLT, lodging costs, franchise fees, parking charges, other unrestricted revenues. Right? These are unrestricted revenues within the general fund for essential services. The restricted funds, also sometimes referred to as enterprise funds. These are the road fund, sewer, water, storm, other smaller sub funds for which the appropriations and revenue receipts are legally restricted dollars and need to be spent within those funds. Examples of revenue for them are all of the utility usage fees, SDC charges, building fees, construction excise tax, etc. And the last is a series of specialty funds. These are either elective reserves or required reserves, internal service funds. We'll discuss those later in this discussion. And then fiduciary activities. The City of Hood River collects utility revenue for the City of Mosier and does that on a fee basis. And so that's all run through a fiduciary fund. The city manages an all fund budget of 65.2 million. That includes 23.4 million in beginning fund balances. And it is a balanced budget in that all resources match expenditures. I want to make a quick note with regards to the fund balances. Most funds have dedicated resources, as we discussed, in the restricted funds, which can only be used or expended within the funds. So I just want to make that note because it's not as if there are $24 million of general reserves, right? Many of these are restricted. Adjusted for fund balances, contingency and transfers. In other words, focusing on personnel services, materials and services, capital outlays, and debt service, right? The things that sort of constitute the core of the budget. The overall budget for those activities, for those critical activities, is 43.3 million in total appropriations. All funds budget, public works accounts for 40% of all appropriations. The general fund accounts for about 20% of appropriations. The internal service funds, again, admin, vehicle, compensatory absences, that's another 9%. You'll note here that reserve funds are 9%. We'll discuss this when we discuss the reserve funds, but those assume fairly large receipts with during this fiscal year. There's a JTA reserve, which we'll discuss, which is supposed to receive about 4 million. The Affordable Housing Reserve Fund is anticipated to receive 1.5 million. So the city doesn't normally carry that large of reserve funds. There's two extenuating circumstances that sort of create that. And we'll discuss that a little bit when we go to the reserve funds. So digging down a little bit into Public Works and General Fund, the largest portions of the all funds. Public Works, water and sewer account for about 70% of all Public Works appropriations. In the General Fund, police and fire also represent about 70% of general fund appropriations. What drives them are a little bit different. Sewer and water, those appropriations are driven more by capital improvement and project expenses. Where police and fire and most general fund expenditures are much more personnel driven. Outside of capital projects, personnel is the largest appropriation category. The city currently operates with an FTE of approximately 74 staff. That has largely been consistent over the last 4 years. Public Works is the largest single group with about 21.2 FTE. Those are distributed across multiple departments. That's followed by fire with 17.8 or just under 18 FTE, and then police with 16.4 FTE. The remainder of the personnel and FTE is in the admin or general fund departments. The URA also has a dedicated FTE as an administrator. His name is Will Norris. I will note, not included in FTE, but critical services that are provided by outside providers. IT, we'll discuss that when we discuss the admin budget. Wastewater treatment plant operations, that's the single largest contract that the city has with a group called Jacobs. And so that is all of the staff for the wastewater treatment plant. Again, that's done as a contract service. And then building inspection services are contracted with the county. And then the other large contract that's important to note is landscaping. So we have a large landscape contract. Again, those are outside services not performed by staff, and so it's not included in FTE. So total personnel expense, this includes benefits across the city, is 13.3 million, with the general fund comprising 65% of all such expense. Within that, police and fire as departments are the two largest departments by personnel expense, and they represent just over 54% of all personnel expense. Administration as a department is the next largest with approximately 10% of all personnel expense. And you can see this divided by both fund as well as individual. We've discussed general fund revenues. We got that at our last meeting. We discussed this quite a bit. And the 5 largest sources, which comprise about 80% of the city's unrestricted revenues. Again, the things that makes Hood River a little bit different. Property tax at 34%. Most municipalities have property tax as their single largest revenue source. The city of Hood River also has just under 20% of its general fund revenue coming from transient lodging tax. We've talked about Measure 5 and 50 just with regards to the impact on the city. I wanted to illustrate this a little bit just as far as what it means for the city. Now, again, Hood River is a little bit unique, and we'll discuss that here. But this is the impact. So this is 2014-15 through this current fiscal year. The orange line is the taxable assessed value, and the blue line is the real market value. And you can see the impact that Measures 5 and 50 have had on sort of assessed taxable value, the assessed taxable value versus real market value. 2014-15 taxable assessed value was about 68% of real market value. moving to the current fiscal year, taxable assessed value is 42% of market value. There is a benefit here, to the extent that there is one, it's that, because real market values are in such excess over taxable asset value, the city doesn't necessarily have to worry about any compression issues, right? So although it will limit the increase in tax revenue, right, 3%, 3.5% or so, it is predictable. Right, the city doesn't have to worry about it.
Correct. Some people might not know what compression is.
So at some point, should property values fall, even during sort of periods of recession, it's possible that the real market value could fall below the taxable asset value, at which point, right, that becomes the ceiling. And so any growth in taxable asset value that is greater than real market value would not be collected, and so you could have a compression of property tax revenues. This is also something that we covered last week. So for this current fiscal year, the city is projecting that it will generate about $11 million in general fund revenues. For the budget year, the fiscal 27 budget, the assumption is that increases to 11.36 million. That is overall a 6% increase. The reason for that large increase is primarily a 10% increase in property tax revenue as a result of the properties of the waterfront URA coming back to the tax rolls. So that's about a 10% increase in total property taxes, which has a significant impact. That will be the last sort of like-kind event for some time. And so on a go-forward basis, sort of with existing general fund revenues, the projection from here on out is closer to 3% in annual increases, as opposed to this year. Significant revenues are received in the restricted funds, right? So this is road, water, sewer, and storm. This is different. With these, we predict 4% average annual growth. Although for this year, we're looking at more of a flat decrease, and I'll explain that in a moment. So the difference on restricted revenues versus general fund revenues is that these are established by council as part of the allocated fees, right? So as council, advised by staff, will set rates for water, sewer, and storm. So fiscal 26 was the final year of a 5-year rate study. We had looked to do a fairly simple sort of increase for the next 5 years. Although in revisiting fees as part of that efforts, we realized that there were a lot of assumptions that had changed significantly. So as part one for this coming fiscal year, we will be looking to recommend some structural changes with regards to fees that would not necessarily have significant impact on rates. With the idea that for this coming fiscal year, we will do a more comprehensive rate study that will include water, sewer, as well as storm, and potentially look at other restricted funds. So that might be an examination of the road fund and revenue options there. The overall goal with any rate study is to provide adequate revenue to meet the operations and maintenance costs, capital improvement costs, and be consistent with industry best practices. But again, this is different because it's not necessarily restricted by anything other than the underlying analysis and what the city believes would be appropriate in utility charges. The road fund is a little bit different as well. Currently, the road fund is this primary source of revenue, the state and local gas tax based on the state's motor fuel taxes. Generally, growth rates are trending lower for a number of reasons. least of which is not the increasing prevalence of electric vehicles. And this has a lot to do with sort of ODOT funding and distribution. So based on projections from ODOT, based on projections from what they're predicting and what they're seeing as an organization. Generally, these funds are projected to flatten during the forecast period. So this is another reason why for the current fiscal year, the city, as part of its rate study, will look at potential options with regards to road fund revenues. We mentioned that personnel expense was the second largest category in the all funds budget. The largest category is the capital improvement plan. Current budget appropriations are about 14.8 million in total capital spending. Approximately $1 million for our vehicle replacements that are in the equipment fund. And so the remainder are capital improvements that are being done by the enterprise funds, road, sewer, storm, water, and some parks projects, although not significant. All of the CIP are outlined in Appendix 1 of the budget book. There's both the 5-year CIP schedule as well as detailed worksheets for each of these funds. The projects are initially informed by the work done to develop system, transportation, and master plans, and then adopted by council and prioritized as part of the CIP, which is the tenet of the city's financial policies. So as you look through the CIP, it's also in the detailed plans. Each of those has been identified in one of the city's adopted master plans, or system plans, transportation plans, and then prioritized by city staff. Working with sort of community and community stakeholders, coordinating across departments, identifying funding streams, engineering, designing, bidding, and then ultimately, sort of being put under construction. And so for this fiscal year, the budget assumes about $13 million in these large capital improvement over in this fiscal year, and over the 5-year capital improvement plan, it's about $50 million in total capital improvements. I do want to make a note. This does not include projects within the URA, or projects in which the URA will have significant responsibilities. And so obviously, that could potentially change the CIP on a go-forward basis as projects are identified in the URA and as requirements from the city are identified as part of that. When we talk about the joint transfer fund, we can discuss some of the things that the city does as far as looking at projects like that. So as we mentioned, the development of a 5-year CIP is addressed as a tenet in the financial policies for the city. Another principle of the financial policies of the city is the use of debt to fund long-lived assets and infrastructure. Generally, long-term assets with a long life are appropriate for long-term debt based on sort of appropriate debt service coverages and appropriate debt levels.
Can you roll up a little bit, because I think there's some legend that I can't.
I don't know if there's, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about the line and sort of that in 1 second, but in general, the orange and the blue sort of represents debt held by the city currently. And this is on a per capita basis. The last large funding event citywide was in 2010, 2011. It borrowed about $15 million in USDA loans with long-term maturities. I think it was a 45-year maturity with maturities somewhere around 2052, 53. A small portion of that goes out even farther. Most of the city CIP projects have been funded by internal loans until this last coming year. The internal loans, while being very effective and a great source of capital, are very short term, right? They have 5-year paybacks in general, And so it's high debt service related with principal repayment. You know, this year, given the number of projects that are underway, the size and the need for outside funding, it became appropriate for us to go out and get outside funding. So in fiscal 26, the city closed a $7.5 million loan over a 15-year term at an interest rate of 3.92. And that was for the benefit of the sewer and water fund. This year's budget assumes about $5 million of additional financing for water, sewer, and storm. And again, I anticipate that we will look for outside financing for those projects. In all instances, the loans are underwritten to be covered by utility revenue. So the water, sewer, storm revenues that are received in these funds, right, are looked to be the source of repayments. And the city, on a fiscally responsible basis, looks to maintain appropriate debt service coverage ratios as it relates to these funds. The city does not currently have any debt by which the general fund is deemed the source of repayment. Now, that does not mean the general fund cannot provide credit enhancement for purposes of lowering interest rates. But with regards to the actual source of repayment, it is within it's within those restricted funds.
Quick question, so each restricted fund has to maintain its own specific debt coverage ratio?
So
How do you guys manage?
yes and no. So depending on other loans, like so for example, water and sewer have USDA loans as well. Those documents have specific debt service coverage ratio requirements that are covenants of those loans.
Yeah.
So that's mandatory, but in general, as a city financial policy, when we're looking at all the funds, we're using a 1.2 debt service coverage ratio, 1.1 debt service coverage ratio across the funds.
Gotcha.
To determine as our internal policies. Another one of our internal policies is that we also sort of make sure we reserve 3 months of operations as a reserve. Right, so between that and debt service coverage ratios, sort of that's how we write the individual funds.
Do you guys report out on what the actual debt service coverage ratios are relative to covenants for each of the funds, or do you manage that internally?
We just manage that.
Yeah.
That is the restriction that we look at with regards to sort of debt service coverage on the individual funds. With regards to what the city could borrow, you know, that is determined by the real market value as opposed to assessed market value of the properties. And so the gray line reflects basically the debt ceiling that the city could legally support. But you know, that's by no means I would consider financially stable. So. Okay, so that covers the overall budget review, right, from a big picture. I don't know if there's any questions before we sort of dive into, I want to cover the internal funds, which is admin, vehicle fund, compensated absences, and then we'll cover some of the other special funds, the reserve funds, fiduciary funds, some of the other smaller funds that I can book. Great. I love when it's sunny outside, I said I just want to live. So internal services funds. These are identified as 3 funds: administration, fleet large equipment, and compensated absences reserve. Each of these aggregate services for the city at large, and allocate out expense for the services or responsibilities that are performed. Starting with administration. So administration is responsible for most admin services, finance services, HR, IT, and legal services, all performed on behalf of the city. The revenue that the administration fund receives is in the form of allocated expense to the individual city departments. So admin charges spread out across the city departments are about 2.25 million. And you can see based on this graph, as far as how they're allocated. These allocations are adjusted each year. But it sort of is sort of relative expense of the individual funds. So these administrative charges, a little over $2 million are allocated to the city departments and funds. An additional $200,000 is expensed to the individual employees. The administration fund in general is sort of similar to overhead in a business context. And that's the basis for the allocation. They are expense allocated, as I mentioned, to the individual departments, including the urban renewal area. We covered the sort of general services that are provided. In total, the admin fund expense is about 5.5% of the total citywide personnel, materials and services, and capital expense. That is up from last year. Last year it was 4.5%. I'll explain some of this as well. So this is a statistical breakdown of the administration fund. On the right hand side, you can see by percentage what are the individual sort of allocations. Starting with payroll, payroll is 52%. The overall admin fund, there's a little under 7 FTE that operate within the fund, and that's a 5% increase over the last fiscal year. Again, the reasons for most of that increase have to do with benefit expenses. The overall COLA increase for wages this year is 3%. As Abigail also mentioned, some of the positions in the administration fund have been adjusted to address compression from sort of CBA agreements, collective bargaining, so union positions that were sort of under administration positions that are sort of pushing wage compression. We will look at, and I'll talk about this in professional services, we will look at addressing this in the coming fiscal year. The big change in administration, IT services. I believe IT services was 6 or 7% the admin fund last year. It's 11% this year. It is $200,000 in total IT services. In addition, there's $80,000 in cybersecurity services that are in the admin fund, and this is a new addition. So during this current fiscal year, what was part of last year's budget was a 5-year IT study. The city has contracted to do a sort of a long-term 5-year IT plan. Up until this point, the city has been handling IT services strictly with a group called Radcom. They provide a great service to us, and they are sort of the help desk as well as basic IT services. We had a very good experience with them. We are going to. It's the intent to continue working with them this year. However, they don't do anything with regards to either cybersecurity design, enforcement, right, or sort of execution. So the single largest recommendation that has come out of the IT study that has not been finalized yet is that the city needs a dedicated cybersecurity advisor or position. So until we contracted. Well, so until we fully understand, right, what can be done with this position, it is a contracted service that the city will be looking at. We will include it in this year's. It is included in this year's budget. I expect that this is at least a 3-year contract. I would also anticipate that this is probably an ongoing expense for the city. Sort of cybersecurity is becoming more important and not less important. And I expect that this is going to be a continuing obligation in the city. Additionally,
Are you wrapped with IT, or I guess before I ask the question?
I can be.
Can I ask a question?
$200,000, that's a lot, right? And then we look at $80,000 on top of that.
Yeah, so the so we have the $200,000 is really just I would say a 5% increase over last year or this current fiscal year. So that's our Radcom contract. That's a number of our software, right? And so the RADCOM contract in and of itself is about $110,000.
Okay.
Or $115,000, including an add-on for security purposes that we'll be doing this year. As a point of reference, the city used to carry almost a full FTE in an IT professional. And so we continue to assert that that's a comparable, it's still comparable to and more beneficial to company.
So it's still most cost effective to outsource IT services than to have somebody in-house with, full FTE and whatnot.
Yeah, for two reasons. One, just on a cost basis, right, sort of versus a professional with benefit expense and all that, it's still beneficial, right? So, it is, and Abigail can opine or not. We looked at what it would be to replace an IT professional. It was very difficult to get the suite of services that was required from one person. And it was very difficult to find somebody that could, sort of both be strategic as far as development, as well as sort of like plugging cables. And so it's until we sort of narrow this down, or the contract becomes so expensive that we need to go outside, it's most efficient to do it as a contracted service.
Chris, can I add one thing to that? Agree with that, and the third part of our reasoning was, we run 24/7 services. If an officer needs IT support in the middle of the night, we have to have a service that can do that, so. Our contract is probably higher than agencies that are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
Yeah. I also want to mention that we think RADCOM's been particularly suited for the city. As part of our contract, we have a dedicated contact that's on site for 1 and 2 days a week. And that's been great. So the fourth part is that I don't think that we're giving any services, but it's contract that's not it.
So you continue to foresee that this will remain to be external outsource as opposed to an internal individual?
Yeah, and at this time, I don't see any reason to change.
Thank you.
I say we did an informal survey of staff and they were very satisfied with the services we have right now.
Well, and our 5-year IT plan, was open to make recommendations that would change from the existing service, even change contract providers, right? If they saw that there was any, they also thought that would get significant value in business.
I would say the department head, it's nice, we're a 24/7 services. If we dedicated, which we had when I was chief at the time, we're contracted RADCOM, we're not contracting an individual employee, we have the whole RADCOM services available, all their employees 24/7. Where before we have an IT working on a project, who knows what they got to ours. Now we call it 24/7, they fix it remotely, we're good to go. Everybody's still sleeping, so that's been a benefit for us. It's above and beyond that 1 FTE. It's really RADCOM as a whole organization that we can utilize for us.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Not follow-up, but I was just wondering where the 80,000 for cybersecurity was in the actual budget.
Yeah, so in the actual budget, it's in professional services. So professional services and the add-on budget is 150.
Okay.
And so 80 of it is the cybersecurity services. The remaining 70 are the items that are listed here. So translation services, staff activity training, those are carryovers from this year, those are annual expenses. 40,000 for website services, web design, etc. Again, that's a carryover from this year, those are annual services. And then what's added for this year, for that Abigail touched on is a salary study. So we will look to do a comprehensive salary study, we'll look to a salary study for specific positions with regards to are these comparable, should there be changes? Are we experiencing compression between positions, etc.? Yes. That Radcom contract, what's the basis for? Or I guess the mix when we get calls in the middle of the night, so how much is billed in arrears, it's based on. How many calls there are, is there a contract that's fixed or? So actually, it's unlimited. So we have an unlimited service contract. It was specifically for that reason that, for our purposes, it's better for us to know what our monthly sort of budget is, right, as opposed to having, incidents of all of a sudden significant IT expense. IT services are moving much more towards that managed services model that's much more unpredictable, so that's why I asked. Yeah.
Can you tell me which, for the 200,000 in IT services, which line, is that the IT services and software transition? I'm trying to find 200. in
Yeah,
this.
Let me get back to it.
Okay, thank you.
Because it's a combination of software
Oh, okay.
services, right, and what is in actual IT.
The contract services, is what you said you would grab com.
That was the.
Is it a contract? I'm sorry, so is that, because that moved this year? Right, so is it a contract?
Yeah, you can get back to me on that.
I'll get back to you.
Thought that write-up you sent said it got moved to.
Yeah, so it
Yep.
was in IT, it got moved to contract services, things in IT that remain there for the subscriptions.
Makes.
I have another question. The $10,000 for the translation services, is that through the next door or who?
For translation services, yes, a lot of it is through the next door. We have also, when we did radio, we contracted with someone directly to do translation services. We've also used El Conte at times, so it's a number, but yeah, mostly next door.
Yeah, I'll mention also, we have enhanced our ability to do some of it in-house as well. So we do handle a number of other, particularly as it relates to core sort of data.
And those, for the individuals that are Spanish speaking that could support that, that's not included in here.
There's
Right, you mean for staff?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
staff are, that's in their personnel costs, and for many of our non-represented staff, that is a 5% differential for their language skills. Not every, some positions, it is required as part of the job,
Yeah.
they don't have a different. And then for the unions, it's in the contract whether they've addressed that or not.
Okay.
Another significant expense in the administration department is legal services. So legal services is $175,000. That's broken up between sort of general legal, right? So the effective sort of general counsel. There's $25,000 in the budget for labor and sort of HR legal. That is then also an additional $35,000 for sort of CBA. Legal representation, so for collective bargaining agreement, which again is outside of just sort of the general HR. And then as it relates to the federal lawsuit that's ongoing, there's $35,000 for federal attorney. This budget is for the current appeal that's being held, based on what happens for that appeal with the change.
The 80 grand for general legal, does that include our primary city attorney and our backup city attorney?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Audit related services, the city, the audit, it feels like the audit goes on all year long. But audit related services are $75,000. And again, that is both for the audit firm as well as some additional CPOs. That's required to pursue the audit. Do we allocate any of your expense towards audits specifically, so they know, how much of your time is being spent there? Or it wouldn't, so the finance director position is already in administration. Yeah. So we get reallocated to administration. And then lastly, capital outlay, again, this is IT equipment, and equipment replacements. This is flat year over year at $35,000. This is mostly laptop replacements or desktop replacements, and maybe once. So. The second of the internal service funds is the fleet and large equipment fund. This allocates equipment replacement, a dedicated site account. It also manages all the vehicle purchases and maintenance. This fund has a significant fund balance, currently 4.9 million. But that's compared to about $15 million in total estimated vehicle replacements for fire, police, and public works over sort of the lifespan of those replacements. The budget for current vehicle replacements includes some carryovers from fiscal year 26. But the schedule outlines of $1.3 million in current vehicle replacements for this current fiscal year. Here's an example of how the fund works, right? There's $1.3 million in equipment that's being purchased this year. But the allocated charges to the individual funds is $730,000. And again, that's allocated across all the contributing funds and departments based on an inventory and replacement schedule. The fleet and large equipment is also a source of interfund loans. And so the budget includes the potential for $1.5 million of interfund loans, either as a bridge loan to the restricted funds, right? Or if there are some requirements that can be handled internally, then they'd be funded. I will mention that the fleet and large equipment fund is also something that's addressed in the financial policies of the city. This is an overview of the vehicles that are being replaced. The large purchases are in fire and public works, with a couple vehicles in police being replaced this year as well.
Sweet.
Compensated absences. So compensated absences is essentially a reserve fund that allocates compensated absent payouts liabilities, which are incurred when employees leave the city. Again, this is allocated to individual departments to avoid significant sort of charges, right, to individual departments of funds. The total estimated liability for the compensated absences of the city is around $1 million. This increased fairly significantly this year, partially due to a change in accounting requirements. So we tried to address the increase in liabilities without significant increase in the department charges. So it's 154,000 allocated department payroll charges across police, fire, public works, as well as non-represented payrolls. And we're targeting anticipated employment. We're targeting a 50% liability funding in the fund itself. The payouts for this year are estimated about $150,000 for purposes of the budget. Again, this is a guess and an estimation. But we don't have any specific sort of retirements or departures that are scheduled in here. It's just based off of best estimates. The increase in the estimated liability as a result of accounting changes. Until we fully understand the accounting change as far as what is accounting treatment versus what is actual sort of redesignation of liability, we've reduced the overall liability fund target until we can better understand that. So traditionally, we had targeted about a 60% liability funding. For purposes of this budget, that's been reduced to 50% with a plan to catch up over the next couple of fiscal years. And again, it's to sort of to keep these charges in sort of fairly static times. We feel that's appropriate. Given our understanding of the accounting changes, we feel that's appropriate for the liability.
And sorry, like, I don't wanna get into the details, but the accounting changes are like from the state or,
GASB.
I don't know what that is.
So it's the overall accounting standards
Oh.
that all
Okay.
all municipalities need to subscribe that.
They're national.
It's not statute.
Thank you.
And I think some of the changes we'll see like in payroll and stuff are also driven by IRS changes.
Do we understand like the yearly contribution to this fund
As far as
for this awesome that we're talking
For the-
about right
for the
now?
compensated
Compensated,
absences?
Yeah,
as far as why it's allocated and when it's
Yeah.
allocated. Yeah, and so
like the percentage every year, is it? fluctuate or?
It is a function of several components. There is what is required to provide for that year's estimated payouts. What additionally is required with regards to preserving or increasing the outstanding fund balance. And then the individual allocations are based upon relative weights, relative payroll rates, both from salaries as well as the differences in benefits. There's an entire spreadsheet.
No, I
It does these
yeah.
calculations, but it is, it does take all those factors into account.
And so the 150 balance that's in there now, that also would include some of the current costs that are, the pay rates that have been increased.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. Yeah, it's all basically, when it does the individual allocations, that's all based on current payroll. That's the individual service, so service funds. Next are the miscellaneous restricted revenue funds. This would be fairly quickly. So miscellaneous restricted funds, again, these are restricted funds, meaning that the revenues received and the balances maintained within these funds are exclusively restricted for the uses of these funds. I will not go through the building fund. Dustin will cover that when we discuss planning and building. But that is one of the funds within this category. The remainder we'll discuss. So there are 3 sub-funds that manage construction excise tax. So the city collects and utilizes a 1% construction excise tax to support affordable housing that's divided among 3 separate funds. The most flexible of these funds is the locally defined affordable program. It's the least restrictive of the use of these funds. 100% of commercial and industrial developments contribute to this fund. 35% of residential CET goes to this fund. Within this fund, it's assumed that appropriations are about $10,000 to support affordable housing. Again, as this is the least restrictive fund, right? We try to keep the most flexibility with regards to opportunities that may come up for funding affordable housing or supporting affordable programs. Development incentive program. This is 50% of the residential excise tax collections. And this is specifically with regards to again supporting affordable housing, but more on the line of developer incentives. And the current budget appropriates about $270,000 of the funds in that regard. The last is the Department of Housing and Community Services. This is a state pass-through, and is 15% of the residential construction excise tax. And so money collected in this fund just gets distributed to the state. And again, that's a statutory requirement. Local improvement district assessment. This is a pass through the Columbia Class State URA. There's $14,000 of outstanding collections that remain. Well, I'll try to chase that. Small grants. This is $15,000 in funds that were previously held in a miscellaneous reserve. These are not allocated to any specific project during this fiscal year. Again, remain dollars. Fire and jail bonds in your book, but this was the debt reserve for the general obligation bond for the fire building construction. There's no balance and no activity. It needs to be maintained until all activity sort of falls off the 3-year time horizon. And the tourist promotion fund. This is the largest of these funds. This is the 25% of transient lodging tax that is dedicated for tourism promotion. The city through a contract passes these revenue receipts through to the Hood River Chamber of Commerce or Visit Hood River, and our budget for the current fiscal year is about $650,000. So, and I believe that that's the vast majority of their budget.
Do we understand how those funds are broken down?
As which ones?
The 679,000
For the, for visitor.
for the, yeah,
So Visitor River goes through a budget process just like us. And so they issue their budget that outlines, sort of how they spend all their funds. So they do the same, they have administration, significant, marketing, and then general adult promotion. And other tours promotion.
Counselor Stepina is the ex officio member to the Visit River Board, and so he will be there during their budget conversations. They're on the same budget calendar that we are. I anticipate they will also be doing this fairly soon if they've not already started.
Correct.
Thank you
Are
for
those
doing that.
collected on an actual or budget basis?
No, that's actual collections. So transient lodging taxes are paid by the hotels and STRs and, the various entities there. They are paid for by, the individuals staying at the rooms will pass through to the city. And so the city, collects 100% of the TLT, and then distributes 25% of it through the tourist promotion fund to visitor.
Important to note that 75-25 split's pretty favorable for us, compared to other
Very
areas.
It's like 50-50 for others, is it?
And then there was a lot of legislation to pass this year that it had to do with that. It really didn't have anything to do with us because we were grandfathered into this, but
Yeah.
we have a whole lot of discussions with VHR about how we have the lion's share compared to other places that collect.
Yeah.
The most favorable split in the state.
Yes.
and then Katie will come to council, right, and
Yeah.
talk about like. The data that as far as how many tourists are coming in.
She gives you an annual report.
Yeah.
So speaking of rates regarding that, in the overview, I mentioned that we established the actual transit room tax rate in 1980 or 1981, and that it was 6%. And then in 1988, 88, it raised to 8%. And I was just curious, maybe I asked this last year and I just forgot.
A few times about myself.
Obviously, that's a long time having been at that rate, and the city has changed quite a bit since 1988. I was looking at other cities around Oregon, and certainly some cities in particularly desirable areas have higher rates than that, and we're kind of more near the average from what I was looking at. So I wasn't sure, if you had information about, why it is that rate and why it's been that rate for that long.
So I'm gonna defer to experts in the room. I don't know why it was set at that point. I know for a period of time, there was concern that increasing the collection rate would trigger a change in the distribution. Right, being with the 75-25 is a very favorable distribution. It's unclear to me currently the way things are. If the rate increases, whether just the increase is subject to a different sort of collection amount. Which would not sort of change the set of for the original 8%, or would impact sort of what is collected.
Yeah,
on a go
it's
forward
like
basis.
tax
I
bracket.
don't know what the city's thought of that. I mean, that's certainly something, again, when we look at sort of things in the future, obviously we'll look at these sort of lodging taxes.
I think when the World Championship track meet came to Eugene, there was some change in this, like 1% was added. And as I hear about the state and the city of Portland spending like $500 million to fix the motor center, it just occurs to me like, oh, are they gonna come sniffing? Grant, you know anything about that?
Statewide.
Right, so I mean, the track meet was statewide. The track meet tax increase was statewide.
I believe the state actually has to additional hotel tax for
Just recently, yes.
for wildlife support.
We could talk a long time about this. We don't need to. Historically, to answer Councilor Mitchell's question, historically, the increase between 1992 and recently, the marginal increase was not worth it for the city because the change in rate would only marginally, very, very marginally change the rate that the city would actually receive. It was state law, and any additional rate that actually go into play had to be spent by state mandate on tourism promotion. So it, from a city perspective, it was just fact not worth it, to pursue as a thing. That's a short answer.
But that has changed now, or?
Nah,
Well, in any event,
We
we
can-
can have this conversation at the point, I just thought that I would bring it up, especially as we're looking at. Fees for other things and rates that just struck me, that. You know, as especially if we're looking in long-term financial and trying to increase revenue streams, like,
Understood.
yeah, just was curious about that.
Yeah, understood. Okay, last. The reserve and fiduciary funds, there are two funds that require some discussion here. Again, the fiduciary fund, we talked about that, that's sort of the Mosier collections, that is essentially a fee for service. On the reserve funds, there are a number of funds that are established as reserve funds. These are different than restricted funds. These are sort of voluntarily created reserve funds that are used to apply for specific uses. So. One of the new funds, which is the old fund, is the PERS stabilization reserve. The PERS stabilization reserve was originally established in 2018 to prepare for significant PERS contribution changes in rates. So it was established to collect certain funds over a 3-year period of time to try to augment what were coming pending increases based on PERS recommendations for significant contribution percentage increases. In 2021, those funds were used along with a 25% state match to create a PERS side account. And so all the funds in that PERS stabilization were then leveraged with a 25% match from the state to create a side account that the city still has and is used to essentially buy down the overall PERS contribution. Based on PERS recommendations and discussions that they've had with municipalities across the state, it does not look like the PERS rates are going to decrease anytime soon, meaning sort of in the next sort of 5 years. And the PERS rates are fairly significant. That's about 25% of your overall salary obligations. So the city would like to have the opportunity to participate again in one of these sort of state match programs. They are announced on occasion. They are on a first come, first serve basis. They are highly competitive. And so in order to have the greatest flexibility to be able to participate in it, we've reestablished the PERS stabilization reserve. $250,000 was allocated from the general fund. It is being matched this fiscal year with a contribution, pro rata contribution from the enterprise funds. You will have about $340,000 available should the state announce the ability to participate in the side accounts, and should the city be successful in receiving that sort of investment. So I just want to note, because it's a new fund with a new fund balance. Again, the establishment of this reserve does not preclude the city at any point in time to decide it just wants to use these funds to augment PERS contributions, right? Because it's credited in this fund does not necessarily mean that it's being held up till such time, right, as an investment program becomes available, but it is there for the opportunity to do so. The joint transfer agreement reserve, this is a brand new reserve. So there is currently in negotiation, it's functionally complete, going through approval processes at ODOT, which includes the Department of Justice, for the jurisdictional transfer of Highway 281, which is essentially 12th and 13th Street, from just south of Oak Street to just north of Pacific. In that agreement, there's the exchange of ODOT funds in exchange for the assumption of certain responsibilities on behalf of the city. So in that document, there's $1.7 million that's being provided by ODOT that is towards required ADA improvements in that corridor. And then there's an additional $2.3 million that's being awarded or provided for general roadway improvements. The agreement is finalized, but not yet signed, but it's anticipated that these will be the final ones. So the ADA work has not been the ADA work has been estimated, right, and sort of priced to the best of our ability, but it has not been comped. The general roadway improvements have not necessarily been defined. Right? And so, in order to preserve these funds and determine how they get distributed to the individual parties that are responsible for this work, we've created the joint transfer agreement reserve. Some of this work is expected to be done through Public Works. Some of this work is expected to be done by the URA. But until budgets are finalized, until responsibilities are allocated, the funds will remain in this reserve and then be distributed by council action, right, based on sort of finalized budgets and again, this is a new fund this year, but it's expected that this contract will be executed early next fiscal year, at which time these funds will be distributed to the city. The Affordable Housing Reserve, this has been a great success and it's been incredibly active. This reserve was established to be dedicated to support affordable housing initiatives. It started the fiscal year, this current fiscal year, with about $930,000 in the beginning fund balance. It also received funds from SB 1530, State Bill 1530, in the amount of $2.4 million. That was dedicated for Mariposa Village. Additionally, it received $500,000 in CET funds from the Hood River County, also to go towards Mariposa Village. So Mariposa Village, in no small part, was completed as a result of the activity that this fund supported. So in addition to the $2.4 million in SB 1530 funds, the $500,000 from Hood River County, additional funds from the city. There was another $100,000 in sorts of additional general Mariposa Village support. And then we're very, very excited this project is approaching completion. For fiscal 27, there is the assumption that there's $1.5 million surplus land sale proceeds. This is not property that's under contract. This is not property that's currently for sale. This is the estimated listing price for that property and the funds of which are assumed to be contributed to this fund. In addition, the city has obligated itself to the Middle Housing Loan Program. This is $500,000 of outside financing provided by the Oregon Investment Board, which required a $500,000 matching fund from the city. And so this matching fund is assumed to be funded out of the Affordable Housing Program, this Affordable Housing Reserve, and again, for supporting middle housing programs through a program established by Wilton Morris and the URA. And then as funds are available, as needs arise, additional affordable housing support is assumed to happen through this reserve.
Is this where you tell us that there's a 20 million that you didn't catch?
Yeah, I wish.
I guess I do, but, and I know this is budget versus actual, but the ending fund balance from this current year doesn't match the beginning fund balance by quite a bit.
Yeah, part of it's the model. Part of it is also there is prospective spending that is assumed in order to establish the beginning balance. You will see this throughout the book, right? Ending fund balances will not match beginning fund balances. This is a appropriations issue. Because each individual fund balance needs to be balanced. But the budget underestimates the beginning fund balance. And it ends up being lower than what's in the budget, then needs to be an appropriation adjustment. So it's generally good to sort of be as close as possible to your anticipated beginning fund balance, but not overstated. So you'll see that throughout. Yeah, sorry.
The sale of the land, that is like something that I mean, it's in this. Dedicated reserve fund, right? But we decided to take that money and put it in here, right? Like, if
Yes.
we sell a piece of land, it doesn't mean it has to go into an affordable housing reserve.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so, and actually, the land sale won't even, the land sale will not happen without council approval, right? And so it's just the current assumption. We have, there is a historical context, we have, put surplus land sales into this fund previously. And so, the initial discussions with regards to the Sherman parcel have been, have been that, you know, should this get listed and sold, the intent is to go to the affordable housing fund, but yes, it's not an obligation, it's not an obligation. Is,
Was there a resolution that sale of surplus properties went to affordable housing?
I think it was just general council policy, I'm not sure I don't remember, I mean, which doesn't mean that there isn't one, but.
There wasn't one referenced.
So the remaining reserve funds, parking in lieu, this collects the in lieu fee from developers. There was about $220,000 in total payments. 35,000 of this currently is appropriated for a downtown parking management plan. Essentially, this is a progress evaluation of the existing downtown parking plan. And a best practices update. And then there's the Parks Facility Reserve. In this 31,000 and change was set aside for tennis facility improvements. That's the remaining amounts from an insurance settlement. The remaining 85,000 is available for additional appropriation for park capital improvement projects. Again, this is undefined but available. And then the fiduciary fund we discussed. This is a fee for service, it's utility collections of water, sewer, and the transportation utility fee collected on behalf of the city of Mosher. The city of Hood River earns a service fee of 4.5%, which generates approximately 30,000 in payment to the city. This is the calendar for the remainder of the budget meetings. So next Wednesday is the general fund department. Police, fire, planning, and then other general fund. And then as well as the building department. And then on the 13th, earlier is at 6 o'clock is the URA budget. And then not earlier than 7 o'clock is all of public works. And then the rest of the process that's required for the public hearing and then the approval.
I did want to follow up on the beginning and fund balance conversation. You know, early in the budget book, you do mention that, you know, we had a nice like post-COVID revenue pop, expense reduction, built some general fund balances in the early 2020s. And then this past year, like this quarter, right? Expenses are starting to, you know, to outpace the growth of revenues. And then you show the next 4 or 5 year projection for that to continue. What's your level of, you know, if you forget this year's budget? I think I asked this last year too, but like, you know, let's think about like long term, right? If you look at that 3 to 5 year horizon, you know, you mentioned kind of, you know, not really seeing amazing growth in property tax rates, or property tax revenues. I know the sewer and the utility rate study has the promise of increasing revenues, you know, like non-linearly. You know, you mentioned gas tax, you know, local gas tax stuff, but I guess what's your view on that longer term horizon on overall, you know, fiscal health, you know, from like that perspective and finding ways to more closely balance revenues and expenditures?
Yeah, so I take some solace in the fact that the city of Hood River is better than most, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, so and you know, and the issues that it's facing is not unique to the city of Hood, right? So that does not make a sort of an active issue, right? I'm just, so part of it is that this is something that many municipalities, League of Oregon City, right, will all be looking at. I did mention, and I think it's referenced in the book, the League of Oregon Cities has come out with a sort of a revenue toolbook. Right, that's available, some things that can be done at council level, some things that require, community approval, some things that you sort of require ballot initiatives, right, but overall, it's sort of a general toolbook. Right. So, we will absolutely look at those and see what's appropriate and what's feasible. The fundamental issue, particularly with regards to providing general services, is that payroll will outpace inflation, right? Whether it's just real wage growth at the very, very minimum. But the reality that the city the city has union sort of, unions that will require collective bargaining agreements, right? And they're looking to increase benefits, and then we're looking to match that as best can at the non-represented level. And that benefit expenses are increasing greater than inflation, like that's just gonna be an issue, right? And so I think that's the one idea, sort of, how does the city best address its basic services first, right? And then identify what in the budget are sort of nice to haves, right, as opposed to must haves. I think the city in the past has had the benefit of being able to do a lot of nice to haves. Not a lot, but let's say a handful of nice to haves. I would expect that during this fiscal year, internally as staff, we'll just sort of look at, where is the city sort of putting its efforts, where is the city sort of spending money? Are there things that are sort of low hanging fruit with regards to consolidation of activities, right? Are there low hanging fruit revenue opportunities? Sort of a start. The city has the benefit of having the time, however limited, but having the time to do that type of thoughtful analysis, so that we can come back here, sort of next budget cycle, with some recommendations and, sort of potentially some suggestions. But I think that this isn't a surprise, right? And if it was we're looking at a shortfall on average, of about $1 million a year, $800,000 to $1 million a year, which is not inconsequential, right? But it's not insurmountable. Yeah.
I had a similar question, and it sounds like you just mentioned staff will do an internal analysis, and by the next year that we have this conversation, you'll have a better understanding of where we could generate revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, being able to understand what those levers are. And then I had another question around some of the like in the COVID relief dollars. Abigail mentioned that it was really challenging for some of the federal grants, but are there any other state, USDA, any sort of state infrastructure grants that can be tied to the CIP that are actively being pursued?
Yeah, the CIP is an interesting one, right? Because we do pursue as many available sort of state, local, right, federal grants are available. The federal grant is an interesting little animal, because it does come with a lot of requirements. And so there is a bit of analysis that needs to be done, whether the federal dollars sort of warrant the additional project expense. But we definitely spend, a significant amount. We definitely spend as much effort as possible looking at sort of all of it.
Back to Rudy's question. Abigail, can we expect, usually when there's a work plan set, you'll come to that December meeting with, these are going to be big projects for us in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Will you have some sort of idea by then?
Yeah, I think, want to see where we land with the bond, but then, I think. Chris and I were talking about late November being as kind of our launch date for that,
Okay.
because we start working on the budget. Well, we should have a pretty good idea of where we are by January, because that's when we start working on the budget.
Can I ask another follow-up? It's just education. So I have a hard time wrapping my head around this every year because I run a business that just like this idea of restricted funds being firewalled from general, it doesn't exist. It's this big, this is like wild.
Yeah.
What you guys do. Congratulations for, doing what you do with this in this construct. But given that there's the restricted funds are firewalled, you know, from the general fund, and the general fund is where the extra money is, right? Let's call it.
Yeah.
It's a balance sheet, right? How does your view of sort of shrinking, you know, cash balance in the general fund, let's say, affect your view on long-term capital expenditures and the restricted funds? And how much flexibility do you guys have to work down potentially long-term capital expenditures in these restricted funds if you need to, you know, generate, you know, positive momentum in the overall kind of.
Yeah. So the issue there is in the first part of your sort of discussion, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's savings in the restricted funds does not necessarily create opportunity for the general fund, right?
Yeah.
And so when we look at the CIP, and the funds, it's really a function of what revenue is being generated, right? What projects can it support, what sort of debt can it support to fund those projects?
Yeah.
Ultimately, right, for lack of nuance, ultimately will be the restrictive issue there is sort of when fees, right, get uncomfortably high for, you know, sort of ratepayers. Right, I mean, that is ultimately the restriction.
Yeah.
Right, now, the city tries to do everything it can to mitigate that. You know, on an ongoing basis. We will do inflationary adjustments, we are looking at doing some structural adjustments, we will do an overall sort of plan. To understand what type of projects the city needs to do, or what type of projects can the city do, and where's that being with the rest of the fees that are being charged to the public.
Can I tag on to that? I would also note that yes, the different funds are firewall, but we do try to coordinate. So for example, some of the water line replacements are driven by a federal mandate to replace the leaded joints.
Right.
Not leaded pipes, leaded joints, not a water danger, but it is a requirement. So those have risen to the top. If we're gonna open the road, we are also, if we need to, we're gonna replace that sewer line at the same
Right.
time. So two separate funds are contributing
Yeah.
to the same project. So we do see that.
Makes
Can I come back to Council President Rivera's question around state and federal funds? When we got the $2.4 million from Mariposa, that wasn't earmarked. There was a bill specifically for water, wastewater and stormwater projects that advanced housing projects. That was the first time the legislature had done that, and they were called out specifically. There were, I don't know, probably 24 projects around the state. Since then, the legislature has moved to making that more of a program that you could apply to, but your projects need to be shovel ready. So at this point, we haven't had a project ready for that, but that is a future source that we are looking for. Generally, I will say road infrastructure, which is our biggest need, or where we lack funding at the federal level, there's no, you know, some dollars maybe come through ODOT, but there just are no federal dollars available. And generally, the state legislature has not been very excited about funding road projects as earmarks or through another program as well. That's where we had hoped to get dollars from the legislature through the jurisdictional transfer program. We had asked for $30 million. We got none of that through the legislature. But so we continue to work toward that. I do think the state legislature seems to at least have an understanding of the infrastructure needs, and at least on the water utility side has had shown some movement for shovel ready projects that advance housing. So hopefully in the future, we will be able to get that. Thank you, Chris.
Chris, I have a question for you. Kind of asked it, but there we go. In relates to your forecasting and whatnot, and a little bit Adam, but it blends both. In this budget, it incorporates the AMP asset management plan. It is assumed in here. Do the forecasts incorporate any forecasting or results of any AMP planning or anything about it? No, okay.
It's gonna take us a year to get that in. So as asset management is, I'm gonna say generally a software program, but it's an inventory program. I said we have 400 fire hydrants, right? When's the last time they were maintained? How old are they? Every pipe that we run, every mile of street, all of our buildings, all of our pressure release valves, all of those assets get put into a system, and then you know, if we say, I don't know, a fire hydrant needs to be replaced every 20 years. Oh, how old are our fire hydrants? You know, do we need to plan to replace, you know, 10% of them every year over the next however many years? To really create that system where things are on a schedule, as opposed to, you know, gosh, I think the street in front of my house is the worst one, so let's do that one. Like, really trying to put some data in and create some predictability, but I anticipate this coming year, just implementing that will be the project first to select a software program. You know, that'll be a major expense, and that will be in the public works budget, so an RFP process for that. And then getting that information into the system so we can start getting reports. I am super excited about this because I love data, I love reports, I love to-do lists. So this fills all my boxes.
You're in the right-
Ticks all my boxes.
The 5-year forecast that's in the sort of model, you know, the assumptions are outlined in the summary.
Yeah.
I will say that, you know, I think the general perspective behind it is sort of looking at this current fiscal year budget, try to understand what things are determined as being one-time expenses and eliminating those,
Yeah.
right? Trying to estimate best as you can where there could be some additional savings, right, at the either admin, which would relate to admin allocations, extending vehicle lives, right, and then sort of vehicle, I mean, it's just basic low hanging fruit type stuff.
Yeah.
I think the idea, and this actually goes to your point too, so if I look at it today and it's sort of $800,000 in sort of long-term ongoing shortfall, I look at that and say, well, you know, I mean, a certain portion of that is just gonna be reduced just by a deeper dive into, you know, sort of an examination as to what's our budget with.
And presumably, this is one of the reasons you guys have been holding on headcount, right? As you kind of see this coming and you're holding on headcount because that would only increase the gap.
Extrapolating status quo.
Yeah, for the most part, right, so then, right, the idea that if you can then incorporate, you know, changes in revenue receipts, changes in sort of asset management. You know, sort of additional sort of incorporation of best practices, right, that should all sort of bear fruit as well.
Yeah, if we're incorporating this as an item, that will be like the vehicle replacement fund, that will be an additional cost we will have to account for, et cetera, every year.
Yes.
So we'll just have to integrate all that together.
So do you have an understanding of what truly will be one time versus reoccurring like year after year, or you just know what it is for this year?
No, I mean, I just did a, you know, just sort of going through the budgets line item. I'm trying to estimate best as possible what I think are sort of one-time expenses. But that's not an exact science.
So this might be more urban renewal related, but my understanding is that waterfront project was super successful in raising income tax, or sorry, property tax. So the Heights and the West Side are gonna be less low hanging fruit in that regard, right? They're not gonna be that same, there was nothing and then there's suddenly these super valuable properties.
It's so interesting when I look at our districts. I think Hood River is like a textbook, like case study of urban renewal use, because you're right, the waterfront started from kind of flat land to, you know, what it is now, really increased property tax values, in part because of so much upfront investment, like the port provided funding, the city, you know, urban renewal district provided funding. That one was a very started and then it ended pretty quickly, and now it will come back on the tax rolls for us and for the other jurisdictions. The Heights already was developed, so it is a much more kind of modest, slow growing piece. It's not, we're not starting from scratch and like building a whole new district. We're evolving. And then the West Side is a mix of that, right? There is some areas that we expect will be that will launch from nothing, and then there will be areas that will kind of move, like Cascade Avenue is in the district. Much of that is developed, maybe some of it'll be redeveloped with property tax values, but a lot of it will likely stay the same. So we have kind of 3 different categories of urban renewal developments. Fascinating to me.
The West Side District has the opportunity to be significant.
Yeah.
You know, I think because if you look at, you know, West Side is the waterfront is an example. The highest jump in sort of assessed value is from land to development. And so, you know, and the West Side's big, you know, it's like 140 acres. And so, and a lot of that is undeveloped land, right? So, if the underlying infrastructure can sort of foster development, right? And if the market can support the development, there could be a significant impact there. I think the issue with all the URAs, and again, the west side's, the waterfront's a little bit different, but it's a, you know, it's a long-term investment. Right, and I think the Heights is not projected to come back to the tax rolls until 2035. And then, you know, West Side just swarmed.
Right, and we have a 25-year estimate, so if we started in 24, 25, or, you know. We will.
Yeah, so
I'll be attending those ribbon cuttings, like. From the nursing home.
I think it's an incredibly valuable tool, you know, I'm incredibly supportive of it. It's a very large.
Well, thank you all for today. Today's kind of the grind, it's a lot of the fundamental pieces, and now we get to the really exciting stuff in the next two sessions when we hear from the department. I'll take that.
All right.
Let's
give it a second.
See you all next week.
Yeah, it's a recess, not right, because the meetings. Yeah.
Maybe I will.
That's it, just say, we'll be back.
No, they don't need it.